Vice Chancellor Wilton joined us quite recently in about March or February of last year, and I actually had the chance to chat with him early on, which was very good, and I really appreciated that opportunity to be able to talk about these issues. Little did I know at that time we would have the idea of doing a freshman seminar, but we've done that and so John Wilton, before coming here, was Vice President at, am I getting this wrong here, at the, no, you're Managing Director at Farallon Capital Management for 4 years. And prior to that, he had about a quarter of a century career at the World Bank. Yeah. And originally from the UK, he did a bachelor's and master's degree at Sussex University and did some work towards a doctorate at Cambridge after that in the area of economics. So with that, I'll turn it over. Oh, and he's also graciously agreed to take questions during the presentation.
Good.
John, go ahead. Thank you again for coming.
Thanks for the invite. And I'm sorry for last week, but as Professor Barsky said, I was a bit sick, and I didn't want to infect everybody. Let me start off by asking you 2 questions. I wanted to start off, and I'm trying to think of the best way of framing it. So who thinks state appropriations, the money we get from the California state, is the most important source of revenue for running Berkeley? Most important in terms of dollars. So if you think there's tuition, federal money, and philanthropy, who would think there's the money from the state of California?
You mean highest, you don't mean in terms of moral importance?
No, I mean in terms of dollars.
Dollars, yeah.
So, you know, biggest. Would anyone think it's the biggest? So if there's 4 sources of revenue, right? Federal, tuition, California state, or philanthropy, which one do you think the state is where? Where would you think it is? First, second, third, or fourth? Huh? Bottom.
Fourth.
Second?
Second. What is it? Yeah.
Well, since it's a public university, I would hope that state or federal government is number 1. But
right. As a public university, you'd hope it would be number 1.
Right. It should be.
Should be.
But
right.
I don't think it is anymore.
Right. And then the second question would be, who thinks total revenue coming to Berkeley has increased in the past 5 years? So if you think it's increased, put your hand up. If you think it's stayed flat or declined over the past 5 or 10 years, don't put your hand up. So we have like 2 people who think it's increased. Anyway, that's great. It gives me an idea of I have a feeling that your impressions of your perceptions are the same as many other people. So what I've done is I asked Professor Barsky to sort of supply a macro view, if you like, of what's going on at Berkeley, and then gradually get down to intercollegiate athletics. So the first part of it is looking at the whole finances of Berkeley, and then we'll go to intercollegiate athletics and see how it fits in the picture. And as you can tell from my accent, I am not, and then from the introduction, I am not a product of the American system, so there's many parts of it that I do not understand and have no history in. And I've only been here for 8 months, so there's many parts. So let me start with this picture, and this picture is meant to capture a reality, which is that Berkeley is wonderful and unique, special, but it is part of a bigger picture. And it's part of a global economy, a federally, it's part of the US economy, and it's part of the state of California, and then there's Berkeley. And what do we know about these circles? One, we know that the world's been through the biggest recession since the Great Depression. And that has economic impacts, and it has economic impacts that will last a long time. There's an interesting piece of academic work by Rogoff and Reinhardt that you should look up, which is called This Time It's Different, where they look at 300 or 400 years of history at economies, and they show that economies that have a cyclical crisis coupled with a financial sector crisis usually spend 8 or 9 years at below trend growth rates. So if that type of empirical work is applicable, we're in like the 4th year of an adjustment process because the recession was so big. The second issue is this federal bubble. You don't need me to tell you that the federal government is going through major debates about its expenditure and revenue with a fair amount of, let's call it gridlock, and probably meaning that the probability of an increase in federal assistance to education is fairly low. The third bubble is California, and 8 out of the last 10 years the state of California has run massive deficits and is projected to do so in the future. In addition, there's a long list of unfunded mandates, if you like. You know, there's K through 12 that's not funded, there's massive infrastructure needs, and you have an unfunded pension program in California. And as we know, one of the ways that they're trying to address this is through massive cuts in expenditure, because at the political level, it would appear that there's not a political resolution of raising revenue. So the point of this slide is the punchline, which is, you know, we are in a different reality than we used to be in, and Berkeley's part of that reality. Now, what does it mean if the slides don't work? So, what's all that mean for Berkeley? So, this is about as accurate as we can get in terms of what is termed the state appropriations from the state of California to Berkeley. I'm going to show a slide about the total cuts, but what does it mean for Berkeley specifically? So I've gone from the very big picture to Berkeley. And back in 2003, we estimate that the state of California's state appropriations to Berkeley was about 500 million nominal. And we estimate that this year, it's an estimate, it's about 240 million. So that is a cut of just over 50%, and that is in nominal dollars. So if you put a 2 to 3% inflation rate over that period per annum, you have a cut in state appropriations to Berkeley of over 70% in a period of 9 years. So this is a dramatic cut in the level of public support, if you like, from the state of California to Berkeley. Unprecedented in its history, particularly of late. Then if you look ahead, you know, this was projections from the state of California itself, its own legislative analyst office, of what we look like going forward. The point of this being that there's big structural deficits into the foreseeable future. So the probability that the state of California is going to find a politically acceptable resolution to this problem is you know, something that you have to think about. Is it probable or not? Because it impacts the probability of Berkeley or the UC system or any of the mandates that are not financed in California being financed. So, going to the question I asked at the beginning, how does it all stack up? Right? This is a very simplified, stripped down version of revenue coming to Berkeley. It's very difficult to produce historically because the way that the money came through the system was very non-transparent. I've spoken to Brian about the problems of Berkeley's financial accounts, but the UC system has even more problems, so you can't easily put things into nice categories. But this is as good as the people in the budget office could do, given the data that we have. So the state was, as we indicated on that earlier one, up here somewhere, you know, 400 to 500 million nominal, and is projected to be around here about 240 million this year. And federal contracts and grants are up here, philanthropy is here, and student tuition is number 2. So there's two or three things to my mind that jumps out of this slide. Is that the obvious one, the support from the state of California in terms of state appropriations. Now remember, we're missing CAL grants and Pell grants in this thing, but in aggregate they add to 100 million. But state appropriations, it means the state now is our smallest source of revenue. It's about 11% of total revenue. So 11% of Berkeley's revenue comes from the state of California through state appropriations. That is a massive change from this world. We used to be in a 50 to 60% world in terms of state appropriations. Now we're in an 11% world. One other thing that comes out of this chart, if you think about it, is that these things are things you need to be competitive to get. Federal contracts and grants, I'm sure as Professor Barsky would testify, you have to compete to get. You, the students, can go wherever you like, as long as you can afford it. And philanthropists can give their money to whom they like. So these things you have to compete to get. This block, you don't have to compete to get. It's the result of a political process. So this is not only a change in the sources, it's a change in the nature of the environment that you're in, which is actually quite significant in terms of what Berkeley does. The third thing underlying this is there's a change in the fungibility of money. In the following sense, federal money is for specific activities, contracts and grants, and philanthropy tends to be earmarked and restricted. So people give for a specific purpose. So I can't use it for utilities or general things. State support has the benefit of being very fungible, and you can spend it on many things, as is student tuition. So the growth in these two and the decline in this causes a problem at the disaggregate level on campus of having money coming in but not being able to spend it on some things that are very high priority. So money's sort of blocked up in different places.
Just a quick clarification. Is corporate funding under philanthropy?
So some of corporate funding is in this line, but not all of it. And the corporate money comes through different avenues. There's also corporate research and grant money.
Right.
Yeah, this is largely philanthropy, which is the return on our endowments. So we have two, and it's the return on investments from the liquid portfolio that we hold. So,
could you clarify, two endowments?
Oh, well, we have the one that has always existed, which is held at the regental level. And so that's what's called the Regents Endowment. It's under Berkeley's name, but it's managed out of the Regents or out of the UCOP. And then Berkeley, I think 3 years ago, set up its own foundation. So money, when you give money to Berkeley, if you specify it, you can have it put in the Berkeley Foundation. If you do not specify, because of the way the university is set up legally, it goes to the Regents Foundation under the account of Berkeley. So like a big holding account, but they're run by different people.
I know you're doing the big picture, but in
Yeah.
the context of what our topic is today, we hear of an athletics endowment as well.
So then what happens is that you have, so you may have a chemistry endowment or a rugby endowment, and then it depends on the giver. If the provider of the financing says, so that those endowments are run by either the monies are invested by either the Berkeley Foundation or the Regental Foundation. You see what I mean? So you give us a check, we have to give it to the Regental Foundation unless you specify that it's for the Berkeley Foundation.
Another quick clarification.
Yeah.
You said we have 11% state support now?
Yes.
And I forgot, what did you say in 2003, 2004?
I think it's about 50%.
About 50. And do you know approximately what it was before, in the years before?
Yeah, no, it was trended up, so always more than that.
Oh, it was always more than
Yeah.
that? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Why is the Regent interest rate so much greater than the UC Berkeley Foundation?
You mean
Berkeley
the,
Foundation.
not the interest, you mean the payout or
Yeah,
the
the payout.
return? The payout, I don't think it's much higher. The payout's established by the boards of both those foundations. So the Regental one sets a payout level for all UC campuses, and then the Berkeley Foundation just for the Berkeley Foundation. And that's a board decision of the two foundations. I don't know why they would differ.
I guess I'm talking about the interest. If you put it in the Regents foundation, you get a greater return than if it's in the Berkeley Foundation.
Yeah. The data I've seen would say the opposite, that the return on the Berkeley Foundation has been higher than the Regental Foundation. Yeah. But that's just, they invest in different things. So this is, so I've been big picture, and we're coming to IA after this slide, is that what this shows you is what happened this particular fiscal year. Okay, so what this big bubble says is, so far, Berkeley is trying to deal with about $135 to $145 million cuts. And how do you get that number? The initial budget proposed by Governor Brown was $500 million cuts for the UC system. Of that, 70 to 80 million comes to Berkeley, right? Because you have UCOP, then you have the other 9 campuses. So it gets a portion according to a formula. So we got that. Then we had unfunded cost increases, which are related to benefits, faculty salaries, utilities, of 40 million. Then there was the final budget of 150, which had another 150 million of cuts for the UC system. So this year's budget had $650 million of cuts, because when the Brown finally passed the budget, he added another 150 million of cuts for the UC system, and that translated to 25 million for Berkeley. So that all adds up to this range up here. And then, as you all know, the budget that was passed had automatic triggers that said if the state of California's revenue as a percent of the target was below a certain threshold, there would be another round of automatic cuts. And the automatic cuts were tiered, Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. Tier 1 was another $100 million cut from the UC system. The numbers came out yesterday, and we're $3.7 billion short of the level required not to make the triggers come into play.
Can I just, and maybe you can confirm this, but certainly everything that's been said, to translate the additional budget cut, the $25 million, that was what gave rise to the 9.6% tuition fee increase that was already on top of the 10%,
exactly,
whatever it was, right? So that's supposed to translate 9.6% fee increase in last June or July goes to 25 million. Right?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, you already have it coming up.
No, I was going to get there.
Oh, okay.
That's fine. I'm glad you pointed it out. So so let me finish on this though. Is that this is not possible. This is highly probable. Okay, because we're $3.7 billion short, and there's 3 weeks to go. So there'll be another $100 million cut. Sorry, getting billions, millions. Which will be another 15 million for Berkeley. So this is going to be about 150 to 160 million shortfall. Berkeley already had some strategies for dealing with this adjustment, because we weren't caught completely unawares that this was coming. So there were some revenue enhancements that were already going on through fee increases and tuition increases. What you already said was baked in the cake for the fee. And then we have increasing non-resident students. And then we're attracting more and more philanthropy. In addition, there's the ongoing exercise called Operational Excellence, and this is designed to take a significant amount of money out of the cost base of running Berkeley. The target here is 75 million per annum from the finance and administration side of running Berkeley. As Professor Barsky pointed out, that this particular cut was offset by an additional tuition increase of 9.6. However, these things, these are medium term. They don't take effect immediately. They take a while. That's why they're medium term. When you have this size of cut, you can't. These do not offset them, even taking account of this. So what we are being forced to do is use any financial reserves the campus have to plug the gap. Right? I mean, the campus is not allowed to run a deficit. Revenue is less than expenses, and you don't have any mechanism for filling them. So you have to use any cushions you have. So that's what we're doing, and obviously that is not a sustainable strategy.
Just a quick question on operational excellence.
Yeah.
In what way exactly is it meant to cut so much money out of the management?
So there's about 9 or 10 or maybe more than that initiatives which will increase the efficiency in current.
Yeah, just
I mean,
education.
yeah.
Yeah, just to follow up, talking about risk. The stadium and the high performance center are very expensive,
Right.
and they're being financed largely by debt, which probably about doubles the actual end cost.
Yeah.
What happens, and the idea is it's going to be funded from these additional very expensive seat sales, which have not really developed as expected.
Yep.
What happens if these seat sales or the revenue from intercollegiate athletics isn't sufficient to
Right.
cover the bond payments? Where will the money come from then?
Right. So let's come to that, because that's, and I have 2 slides.
Okay.
And that last slide is on that question. And this one, you're ahead of me, both of you. This one's on your one, which is I looked at the Chancellor's Committee, and they conclude that IA generates about 25 million in additional revenue per annum than if we were in a world where it didn't exist.
Which goes to the department. Right? It doesn't.
No, that's over and above. So that's net to the campus. So if it was correct that the net subsidy at the moment is, I don't know, 8 or 9 million, what this suggests is that if you abolished it, we'd be worse off financially. If intangibles are difficult to measure and there's not inclusive evidence, then this suggests that even financially you'd be worse off given the level of subsidy. I don't have an opinion on it, I'm just sharing what the report says.
So it's not really a matter of opinion. Would it be possible to obtain, if you could just go back for a moment on that quote,
Yeah, I was going to
the raw data that supports that claim?
I don't think you can read the. I mean, I think it's.
No, I read it. I read that, and it's not substantiated.
It's
it
the
throws
opinion
out a number as an opinion.
Yeah, it's the opinion of.
But
Scott
as an
Wood.
economist, don't we want to have some raw data that would support it?
Yeah, I would personally. There is no way of verifying it, right? Because you're asking a question where there is no data. You're asking.
The opinion seems to fly in the face of these 90% of studies that have been done. The person he mentioned as an economist, actually, Professor Zimbalist at Smith, is an economist who referred to those studies. So this claim, which I'd love to hear more about, is in fact contrary to what the majority of the academic literature appears to say.
As I say, though, you're trying to. I mean, I briefly went through it because it was background for the class. Many of the things that he's looking at are not applicable to Berkeley. But secondly, he doesn't try to measure this because you can't measure it.
And how can you come up with 10% if we
That's
can't
what I'm
measure
saying. It's very clear in the report that this is a subjective judgment by the person whose job it is to go around and raise money.
Right, so it's a subjective comment.
It's a subjective judgment by the person whose job it is to raise money.
Right,
And I happen to think that he's quite honest and probably gives you a good opinion. You can't measure it. It is what it is. So coming to the last slide in your question. So what, going forward, I've laid out 3 priorities for IA. One is that I want to develop a sophisticated or comprehensive model for the whole of IA because we need it. I mean, every part of Berkeley needs to be able to have a cash flow statement and a balance